Let's get going. Welcome, everyone, to the CSM Mastermind. Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our success coaching training program, and that's really fast. Okay, our success coaching training program. Why is that going so fast? There we go. Yeah, I love it when things move smoothly. Here, we're back for our monthly live webcast today, talking about becoming an agent of change inside your own organization. This learning opportunity is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training. With more than 36,000 students from nearly 100 different countries, our skills development platform is making an impact across the globe. Whether you prefer self-paced learning, an instructor-led bootcamp, an interactive workshop, or a personalized weekly coaching program, our wide range of customer-focused programs and formats are tailored to meet the unique needs and learning preferences of everyone. If you're eager to level up your customer-facing skills, don't miss out on these amazing learning opportunities that can truly transform your professional journey. And for those of you who don't know this, it's National Career Development Month, and we're offering a ridiculous 75% off on any of our on-demand solo CCSM training and certification programs. Wait, Ashley, is this right? 75% off?
Yeah, that's what the marketing team sent me.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Looks like I need to have another talk with Todd. Okay, then. Well, Ashley has dropped a link to our program page along with a coupon code for that ridiculous deal. You can find out more about all of our programs and workshops at successcoaching.co. This CSM Mastermind series is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success. No matter where you work, what your role is, or who your customers are, we've got you covered. A few housekeeping items before we get going. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be posting a replay and transcript on our website early next week. So if you missed any part of this, especially if we go past the hour, we typically go past a quarter past the hour, you can watch the replay, read the transcription. We also encourage active participation, so please feel free to ask your questions using that Q&A button located at the bottom of your Zoom interface. Questions with higher upvotes will receive priority during the Q&A session. So if you see a question that is close to what you were going to ask, you're better off upvoting that question. And for our LinkedIn Live audience, you can also post your questions directly, and they will be relayed to us. To maintain a smooth discussion, please use the chat window exclusively for commentary while directing your questions to the Q&A window. And if you forget, Ashley's here, and she will remind you. Now, there's a bunch of thought leadership out there, along with loads of theories on how to deliver customer success. But in this series, we're going to focus on practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those who are actually doing customer success day in and day out. Now, to make that happen, we've invited three amazing panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are folks who are really damn good at what they do, and we're going to ask them to spill the beans on their experiences and perspectives. So without further ado, I want our panelists to introduce themselves to you all and share a little bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started in alphabetical order, even though it's towards the end of the alphabet, with Sierra.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to virtually meet you. I'm Sierra Ryan, the VP of Customer Success at Radency, a tech company that provides the leading TA solutions for large enterprise organizations. I'm based out of Falls Church, Virginia. I've been in customer success and SaaS for nearly 15 years. And I started out as an hourly support specialist for a small company here in Virginia. Throughout my career, I've worked my way up to account manager, senior account manager, director. Most recently served as VP of Customer Success for a startup called Brazen, where we sold virtual hiring events. We went through an exit about a year ago. So all that to say, I've been in your shoes. I've seen a lot. I've managed all different types of customers. I built up a CS team from nothing. I've had to scale up 4x, scale down. So being a change agent for your organization or even for your customers' organizations and knowing how to manage change is something that's so important and something I'm really passionate about. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Sierra. And just in case you were all wondering, that really is her gym. That is not a background, even though it's so neat and
Yeah.
looks so clean, because my gym does not look like that. There's crap hanging all over my machines and all that stuff. So I'm very impressed with that
Because it's
background.
not used as often as it should be.
So we can't see the dust.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, awesome. All right. Thanks, Sierra. Toby, you're up.
Hey, thank you. Toby Lucich with Magic Button Labs. For those of you that attend these regularly, I've been on panels in the past around change management. I lead the change management boot camp here at Success Hacker and Coaching, and have been involved with Andrew and team now for several years. So coming to this conversation, and very much about that change management motion was the recognition that people aren't going to just operate under direction. They're not going to be persuaded by the raw beauty of a tool or the elegant technology. It's that there's a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of enrollment, a lot of investment that we solicit. And so I'm always delighted to talk with CS teams about how do we affect that? How do we engage on a more personal level? And how do we use that to help shape the direction that teams are taking? So ultimately, we know that adoption is what unlocks future value. And the better job we do at that, then not only do we make evangelists, but we see a totally different lifetime value. So delighted to be joining today and part of this amazing panel.
And this is why, we asked Toby to be. Toby's basically our founding strategic partner of our partner network. So our change management for customer success content was written by Toby. So he's one of our original partners. I was going to say, Toby, you're one of our oldest partners, but I didn't want to take a shot at your age and your gray hair. Wait, I just did. I'm sorry. I just did that. My bad.
Thanks for that.
Hey, I'll take the gray hair over the no hair.
Yeah,
you win,
exactly.
Toby.
The gray hair. Well, yeah, so we get the gray hair and the no hair, and I'm in between the two of you. Except I can't go gray. Apparently, it's a redhead. So, which is
nope,
good.
But thing. You could do this as a redhead.
Yeah, that's true. I've been looking into that. Toby's got, but look at that. He's got a mop up there. I mean, he's not going to lose it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm literally in between Toby and Ty right now. I'm trying my best not to swing over to Ty. Thanks, Toby, and last but certainly not least, Ty.
Hey everyone, Ty Raia. I oversee customer success for Nozomi Networks, which is an OT cybersecurity company. And I got my fun start working with Aaron Thompson, who you might know from Success Coaching. So I got to learn from the very best years ago, probably close to 10 years this year. So
that's back when you guys were at Jive. Yeah,
that is correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Yes, and Ty also is a repeat offender. I'm sorry, a repeat guest of the program, like Toby. All right. So once again, we all appreciate your time today. So let's now get to the topic at hand. Most organizations claim to be customer-centric, but their internal processes and decision-making tell a different story. As customer-facing professionals, we're often treated as mere feedback collectors rather than strategic change drivers. And this is fundamentally backward. In fact, I'd argue that customer success and support teams should have more influence over product and process decisions than most executive teams, because we're the ones who actually know what our customers need to succeed. Show of hands in the webinar chat of anybody who agrees with that. To get the conversation started, what was the moment you first realized you needed to become a change agent in your organization, and what triggered that realization? Who wants to start?
I can jump in there. I remember I started as an individual contributor at a small organization. I had just recently started there, and I was being shown around the office. We had this open floor plan, and sales, marketing, CS, we all sat together. However, there was a literal red wall that separated us from the product and dev teams from the rest of the company. And so it was like this running joke at the company that there was this literal physical separation. But shortly after I started, I realized there was also this real cultural divide between the teams. And so I distinctly remember sitting in a staff meeting. We had a large customer, a colleague of mine managed, that needed a key feature. And so she, put in the ticket, and product agreed they were going to work on it. It was a large customer. It was going to be ready in the next release. So weeks go by and we're sitting at a staff meeting and product starts to cover this feature that's going to be released. And the look on my colleague's face, it was just, she was livid. It was not at all what the customer needed. We thought it was a pretty straightforward request, but ultimately product didn't really understand the requirements. They had wasted time building the wrong thing. The whole time she was telling her customer it was going to be ready at a certain time, and it now wasn't going to be. And it wasn't really the first time that this had happened, apparently, at the organization. And so I realized at that moment, we really need to get a cross-functional team together to discuss what's going on here and figure out how we solve for this so that this never happens again, and come up with a better process here. So
this was, so you feel this was an issue with the process? Was it a breakdown in communication? Was it a challenge on both sides? I mean, you've got that red wall of protection on one side, so you've got this implied kind of barrier. But did the customer facing team do a good enough job explaining the business case? I mean, there's a lot of elements.
It was totally on both sides. Yeah, that we needed to improve our collaboration and communication. I think we needed to align on sort of rules of engagement, right? I think they were so stuck in, you have to submit a JIRA ticket, but there were no guidelines on what was really needed to be included in the JIRA ticket so that they understood the requirements properly. And there was no process to validate as they were building the feature or the product, that it was on the right track and communicating with customers directly and pulling them in. So there was just like a lot of communication that needed to happen, and we did get there, but it was just clear that that process was not working, and we needed to get a team together stat to change that.
Yeah. Toby, Ty, either of you have an experience?
Yeah, I got a fun one.
Okay.
So this isn't maybe the first time it's happened, but I can tell you with my current role, one of the first things I like to do is I like to talk to customers before I start doing anything, right? Understand their experience. So while I was doing an early customer journey call, I asked a little bit, about their onboarding. And one of the things they mentioned was they got something like 7 emails from different departments with different messaging. Some of it was branded, some of it wasn't. And what an awkward experience it was for them as a new customer. As you can imagine, that's not a great one. So I identified who all these emails are coming from and what departments they were. And I put together this full team just to tackle this one thing. Like, how can we get this into one cohesive email? And as you probably know, there's a lot of back-end systems. A lot of those are automated. A lot of those go through like Salesforce, maybe NetSuite. So it took us about 6 to 8 months to get all of the pieces put together. But as we're all meeting this cross-departmental group, all 7 departments, we realized that this is really useful and we don't really have another area for us to do it. So I actually picked up a group called Nozomi's Process Improvement Group, where every month that's what we go through is what's on the docket, what things are changing, maybe what new software are people evaluating, so we can collaborate on those things together versus doing it behind a silo.
I like that.
So, yeah.
Love it.
Now, Toby, you teach teams and about this sort of thing. Any stories where you've experiences where you've kind of highlighted that a company needed to be thinking about internal change?
Yeah, this topic, there's so many pieces that come to mind because this is such a common issue, right? Everybody's got a specific objective, from our senior executives to our product teams to our developers. And some of these teams are focused on margin, and others are focused on financing, and others still are focused on tech debt management. And so, so often each of these groups are looking at the singular tree directly in front of them, whereas my experience with CS teams, it's a particular person that's drawn to this work, and they're looking at our customers in a more complete way. They're not asking, what do we think is a beautiful snowflake that we should share with the market? They're asking, are we solving problems? Mm-hmm. And so that kind of change agent mindset is something that has to be fed back. And as a newer capability inside of organizations, it doesn't always have the same voice. And so One conversation we've had several times is very much about, what is positional power versus influence power. And I think we'll probably explore that a little bit today. But
Yeah.
CSs have such a powerful base to operate from. And a lot of it is really about how do we communicate back to help mobilize our collaborators to bring down the giant red wall that Sierra described. And so super excited to engage in this conversation.
Well, let's go to a level deeper then. Let's start talking about, and I'm going to start with you, Toby, because once again, this is part of your consulting and your training. What are some of those key traits of an effective change agent from your experience, and how we like people to leave here with actionable ideas. So, what are some of those key traits of an effective change agent, and how can individual contributors, or actually anybody, how can they cultivate those things?
Yeah, it's a great question. It starts with 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? And I think that by nature, we're talking with a group of folks that are keenly aware of that. So how do we take in, what are those active listening skills? And are we hearing not just what our customers are saying or our peers inside the organization, but why are they saying it? It's often the question behind the question that we don't explore, but that gets to the heart of the problem. And so, folks that have been exposed to lean and the 5 whys, it's like, keep digging,
5 whys, yeah.
right? But why is that? Why is that a frustration? And so the thing that I often see with really effective change agents is that they have examples that are relevant for their audiences, but they're listening to think about, how do I share this in a way that I'm heard, not just that I voiced an opinion.
And I think that takes us to the next trait. And I want to turn back to you, Sierra, because your story, when you said, well, what product produced was not what the customer needed, it made the first thing I thought about was, well, did we tell the right story? Right. So how important was storytelling, or the lack of storytelling, in your experience?
Yeah, I think it was obviously very important to make sure that we understood what problem were we solving, not what feature needed to be built. And so part of it was not properly telling that story in the Jira ticket. Part of it was not communicating as we went along and validating with the customer, like that we're on the right track with what we're building. And so I do think that we were able to come to a better place by understanding, like, here's how you should submit a Jira ticket. Here's the communication that needs to happen after that's been submitted to ensure we're all not wasting everybody's time.
Right. Ty, what did in your process improvement team that you have, what role does data play in that in your decision making and your planning that you do?
What role does data play? Honestly, not that much, because we're mostly dealing with like operational changes.
Okay.
So I mean, the reason we had 7 different emails happening to a customer was because 7 different departments weren't talking to each other. So we just needed a place for us to like talk about what we were doing, what we were planning, and oftentimes share resources. So we don't have the experience of 7 different emails as a customer.
Right.
In a variety of different ways, right?
Well, and I think the data is that, hey, the customer got 7 different emails, right?
Yes.
That is that is an example of way too many emails and clearly a siloed organization that's not communicating.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah.
I want to turn back to Toby, because you brought this up, the understanding the ability to influence. Can you go deeper in that? Because I know this is one of the things that you talk about in your training. And that we've talked about before.
Yeah, that opinions, everybody has 1 or 2 on any given topic, right? And so
I've got a few. I've always got a few.
2, 3,
4,
but
6.
Your question about data and influence, if we think about, just to draw a quick distinction, positional power is title based, it's authority, it's how we bring things from the top of the ladder down to teams, right? But the influential power, that personal power, comes from the individual up. And so a lot of how we organize, a lot of what we take in and how we present it back, the more that we do to lean into that, the stronger our arguments. And so I feel like CS as an organization is in a position to have enormous credibility because of the customer stories. The example that Ty just shared, we're hearing it on the back end. The sales process is done. Sales is off and running. Marketing is looking at sales 2-3 quarters out. Product is planning releases next year. But as CS professionals, we're talking with the customers right now today about the gaps in our solution or about the things that don't quite work the way they expected them to. And so that's a source of information power that we can uniquely retell that story and then expand on to reframe it for our internal stakeholders. Another form of this influence power that I think we often don't think as much about is that we're in a position to connect people because we do hear similar frustrations. We hear similar challenges. And when we start to see this pattern playing out across multiple customers, that's not just an indicator, that becomes a fact, right? If we have dozens of customers with the identically same complaint that aren't talking with each other, we're in a unique position to raise a hand and bring that to the forefront. So this idea of influence isn't just about, are we personable? That's part of it, but it's, can we also translate what's coming in a way that others can action it? So sometimes it's shrinking it and analyzing it, making it a very succinct recommendation. Other times it's just presenting the data and bringing people into the conversation inside of our own organizations.
That's the power. I think it's interesting how all of those different traits are so interconnected, right? It all starts with active listening to uncover what the root is and what the real situation is, and then you grab you need to have an understanding of where you sit from an influence perspective, have some self-awareness, combine that with data to tell a story, right? To drive that change, right? Because going in and saying, I think we need to do X isn't good enough.
Well, we often...
Good. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we oftentimes, we hear what people say, but in CS, we get to see what they do. We get to see how they use it. Their aspirations are one thing, and that's fair. And that's, but what we say versus what we do is something that you've got to get really intimate to understand differently.
Yeah. Ty, you had something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that when I put this together, when I first kind of flagged this issue, apparently I'm just going to talk about this email for the entire session. The people I was reaching out to sit down and have these conversations are titles well above mine, right? So they're not doing it because I put out a directive. I did a what's in it for me, which is you don't have to be sending all these individual emails or have all these different processes. We can streamline this and take all of these off of your plate through automation. So it's really an appeal to making their day-to-day easier. And, you can do that at any level.
I love that. What's in it for me, right? I love that.
Absolutely.
The what's in it for me for them. The with them is, exactly. We need to always be thinking about the with them, whether we're trying to get our customers onboarded or whether we're trying to get somebody in another organization to do something, right? That with them, that understanding and that empathy. We forgot to put empathy as a trait. Empathy is such an important trait. It not only is an important trait to better understand what the customer is asking for, it's an important trait for us to make a connection with people in other organizations. We're trying to get them to do something. Right. In order for us to affect change, we need to be able to communicate effectively and present things in a way that they're going to be receptive to. So, Sierra, how do you distinguish between customer feedback that requires immediate tactical changes versus feedback that signals a need for a more strategic organizational change?
I generally try to consider what is the impact of implementing this customer's feedback, right? Would this change benefit just that customer, a few customers, or would it benefit many customers and your organization? You could use what I would call maybe the outlive litmus test. Would this change outlive you at the organization and outlive them as a customer? If so, then that's a sign that it's probably there's a need for a strategic organizational change. If not, then it's a sign it's something more tactical.
Love that.
And I think it's important that we're identifying that right out of the gate, right?
I'm curious, Sierra, in that So I know with customers, we often do like the urgent versus important. Do you also do that with like internal operational kind of stuff as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the Eisenhower matrix, right, Toby?
Eisenhower. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Love that matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one example too, to just kind of put that less theoretical. I worked at a startup and there were no analytics for customers to review. Just about everything was pulled manually. And our customers just constantly needed these reports and were reaching out. And it was taking time away from us to do, high value activities and build relationships with our customers. And so I think at first we took a more tactical approach. We ended up hiring somebody to help with manual reports and training, which was taking away a lot of time. And that worked for a while. But then as we grew and our product became more complex, competitors began to offer more out of the box reporting. We just knew like this is something we really need to tackle more strategically. And so we were like, we're going to halt on doing all these custom reports. Let's figure out how we make some standard ones that are embedded within our platform. It's all self-serve. And that was great. Like we were able to reduce support agent hours. We'd have support agent hours or support agents take an entire day pulling survey results and formatting them and sending them to our customers weekly. Now it's all self-serve. We don't have to pay for those agent hours. We have so much more time back in our day. So it's definitely something we needed to step back and tackle more strategically.
So, and just a reminder, folks, if you have a question for the panel, we will get to those in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So please add them to the Q&A or take a look at the questions already there and upvote questions that you want to see answered first. So we've talked about in your examples. We've talked about some of the process that you went through. But when you think about it, when you identified a need for change, and I definitely have some of my personal favorites. But when you've identified a need for change, how do you build that initial business case, and what data points have you found most compelling when presenting to stakeholders?
Yeah. I think the first thing you really need to do when you're building a business case is know your why. And if you can tie that back to one of three things, the change will help increase revenue, decrease costs, or reduce risk.
Yes.
You're going to have a much more likelihood of catching people's attention and getting that change to succeed. And
even better if you can wrap all three of those things into your business case. Yes.
Right. So in that example I talked about with the reporting, like we could talk about decreasing cost of support agents, increasing revenue because our team could focus more on high value activities that are necessary for the renewal, reducing risk of not sharing the wrong report with a customer or pulling the wrong data because we were doing everything manually. So every business case is built on a foundation of, knowing your why and can you tie it back to one of those things?
If I can add to that, yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think when I'm having the larger conversation, that's what it looks like. And then oftentimes when it's getting that individual on board, it's me understanding their psychology, right? Which is, I don't want to work as much, or I'm looking to get a promotion, or I'm new to this role and I want to stand out, right? Like, what is that thing? What is that carrot I can put in front of them? And I usually have to do that little bit just because if I go, revenue will go up, they're like, yeah, I got to work another hour. It's not worth it, right? So I always want to find that one little carrot for that individual. Sometimes that can take a lot of work though. But
I love that. To just kind of follow on this thread, I think so oftentimes we have a data point that becomes a pattern that becomes an issue. And I love Sierra's simple litmus test of, is this important enough to outlive me personally? Is it a systems level piece? And whether you're new to the organization, whether you're just, part of the machinery in one corner of it, one way to really start to raise visibility of the concern you've identified is to start to look around your organization and think about who are those more influential stakeholders, who has a bigger pulpit, who has positional authority. And as we start to socialize it, we have the choice of saying, this is a fact, we have to take action, or we can ask, this is something I've observed. How might this affect you? Or have you bumped into this from a different angle? And so I really love Ty's collaborative group, because what we're doing is we're making the problem space a little bit bigger, which also gives us a lot more angles to come at it. And so to get to a coalition of the willing, that small group that's passionate and going to advocate, oftentimes we have to open it up a little bit to understand where their interest is. And so this idea of how do we bring people in, they also give us their own personal horror stories about past attempts at it. And if you're new to the organization, so often the fresh eyes are great. We see all these opportunities for improvement. What we don't necessarily know is somebody else took a run at that just 6 months before we joined. And so this idea, like back to the 2 ears, 1 mouth. I don't know that that's my theme today, but maybe there's a lot of organizational history that doesn't necessarily live in the upper echelons, the executive suite. And so thinking about how we use the influence of others is a really powerful way to drive change agendas as well.
Yeah, so interesting story, and we kind of moved into this. The next question I was going to ask about building that coalition of supporters. I had a situation in a company where there was a shortcoming in the product that added an additional 60 to 80 hours of work for my consulting team to actually implement the product every time we implemented the product for a particular solution that happened to be about 40% of our business. So I went to product and I said, "Hey, you can fix that. How long is it going to take to fix this?" And the head of product said it's going to take 2 FTE for 3 months. But he kept pushing back on me. He's like, "Dude, I can't do this. I got all these other priorities." So I understood his motivation. I employed empathy, figured out his perspective. He's under a lot of pressure to get product out the door. And so, but I felt that this was so important because it was taking 60, 80 hours per project away from that we weren't charging for, away from other opportunities to help customers extract more value. So I understood his barriers that he had. So I went to the CFO and I said, "Hey, David, here's the situation. This is what it's going to take to fix. And I want to show you, I came with data." And I said, "Here's how much lost opportunity cost we've got because this thing isn't fixed." And so I got him on our side. I already had the product on I had the product conceptually on our side, although he was under a lot of pressure. So what I did is I took this to the executive staff meeting and I said, "Here's our situation." And, head of product is on board with fixing this, but he has all these other priorities. And our CFO chimed in. He's like, "This makes the most sense." So I basically used that coalition of the product who was, wanted the CEO to say, "Hey, go fix this." And the CFO barking at the CEO going, "Hey, you need to fix this." So that was an example of kind of effectively assembling the coalition, even though one of them was kind of hesitant because, hey, my job, what I'm being measured by is to get this other stuff out the door, but finally got the blessing because the CFO is whispering in the CEO's ears, we got to stop the bleeding here. And so that was an example of pulling together that coalition. So I found that as a really effective strategy. Are there any other strategies that any of you all use to, across different teams to support significant changes?
I think that's great. Personally, I found too, when you're trying to advocate for a change, nobody likes to hear about changes or even propose changes for the first time in a large group setting. So to the extent possible and reasonable, try and socialize your changes with your potential coalition of supporters one-on-one before going to a large group and saying this needs to change. That way you can get their input, their concerns, their feedback, and hopefully their buy-in that a change is needed, with those key influencers. I would also say prepare for pushback. Think through others' perspectives before you present a change to them. What are the types of tough questions or pushback that you might receive, and how would you address that and practice it if needed? Practice on a friendly or somebody who's been there. Maybe you're, trying to present something to leadership during a meeting. Is there somebody who's been in those leadership meetings that could help you think through questions or pushback you might get, and would they be willing to practice responses?
I think that's a great point. You need to be prepared to navigate the resistance
Mm-hmm.
that you If this was something everybody was thinking about, we got to fix, it would have been fixed.
Right.
I feel like I wind up doing like debate club prep. I don't know if anyone else does this, where I come up with all the
Is
best
that like
arguments.
Fight Club, but debate club?
Kind of,
Okay.
except with your mouth only. Yeah. But like coming up with every possible argument in return and making sure I have a good argument back to that I can argue both sides quite well. At least that's how I prep myself going into those meetings.
I love
How
it.
important is that prep, Todd? Toby. Sorry, I apologize. Didn't mean to insult you. Call you Todd. How important is that prep, Toby? When you are trying to manage change.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first rule of debate club, as I understand it, is yeah, get your data
Be prepared.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have, just like we tell customers, let's focus on happy path first, and then we'll look at the divergence. Oftentimes we have a vision of the happy path that's unique to us. But, first it's gathering some data points, having people challenge that quietly. I love Sierra's comment about, if you expect it to be inflammatory, don't bust that out at the shareholders meeting. Maybe that's something you start to socialize over coffee. And so when we couple that with Ty's logic of beat me up, tell me what I'm missing, tell me why my perspective is too narrow, we're starting to assemble, multiple views, but also we've got a lot of fingerprints starting to show up. And it's that shared ownership that I think can be incredibly powerful. So it's not just the preparation, but it's also, can we expand so it's not just Toby's opinion, but that we have a group of people, and then with a larger base of kind of shared vision. Now, what I love to do is, what is that first most critical step? Maybe it's a pilot, maybe it's a conversation, maybe it's just trying a new process motion for the first time. But we all feel differently to say, I'll give it a shot. Let's try it as a one-off versus let's radically rewrite everything that we do today. And so picking that tip of the spear, I think, is something that takes practice. But as we engage others, we get that feedback that helps us really start to see where the healthiest, strongest argument lies.
Yeah. I would say a lot of times CS professionals tend to be people pleasers too. And so that can be uncomfortable. And we've got to, be confident and try not to shy away from conflict, try to master how you handle conflict. That doesn't mean be a jerk and, be aggressive, but try to have healthy conflict. And in order to do that, I think you have to have a level of foundational healthy relationships and trust built with your colleagues. So that's also important as a change agent to develop. There's a really great book that I'm reading called The Advantage by Patrick Leoncini, I think I'm pronouncing his name, on organizational health. But he talks about, when you have trust, conflict is nothing but the pursuit of truth to find the best possible answer. And it's not just okay, but it's actually preferred. If you have no trust, then conflict is just politics and you're trying to manipulate others and win an argument, regardless of the truth. So try and build trust with your team and get to know them and their personal histories. Yeah.
And who are we also trying to build trust with, Ty? Every day in these roles. Our customers, right?
Yeah, I thought we were just talking internally. I was like,
yeah,
I don't know,
no. But still, my point here, though, is some of the same skills, some of the same activities that you should be practicing as an individual contributor with your customers are the exact same skills you should be using internally, right? These people are your customers. They're your internal customers. Active listening, empathy, data, storytelling, self-awareness. All of these things are things that you're already practicing or you're trying to hone as a customer-facing individual, right? You are doing the exact same thing. You are trying to build a coalition. You are trying to connect with people. You're trying to understand their perspective. The exact same activities, the exact same skills that you should be using with your customers, you need to use internally.
I feel like, Sarah, and let me know if I'm wrong here. I feel like you kind of walked around something that I think we don't talk a lot about in this space very often. I think we do like the positive messaging, which is sometimes this does look like diplomacy. It does look like politics. It does look like finding who influences who used to work together 20 years ago, who's been, partnered up, their last 3 jobs. Like, how can I get into that network and get this one person who's my linchpin right, on my side. Like there's a lot of that kind of positioning we do whenever we have operational change. I don't think we talk about it this much, but it is a really big part of it.
Yeah. And Toby, you kind of talked about that a little bit with your like positional power and then your influence power. Yeah. And being self-aware about that.
I mean, 100% is politics. In my story, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew going into it that the head of product was not going to make this change. And I knew that the way to get this change pushed through was through the CFO. It was 100% part of the plan. Just the way I went about it.
Part of the plan was to not have the person in product mad at you at the end of the day for it.
Exactly.
Right?
Part of the plan was to actually present this as a kind of as a solution that the customer facing team and the product team, I said, hey, we worked together on this and we figured this out. And I made it sound like it was his idea and the CFO was backing it. But it was all about politics. It was all political.
Good politics, we let other people take credit off it in order to get the wins that we want.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
Have you guys read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss? Yeah. He talks about that
right here, and it is probably my most recommended book for the last 3 years. Love this book.
Yeah.
This is core customer success right here. Yes.
Highly recommend that book. A lot of great tactics internally and with your customers. But he talks about this a little bit in his book where, for those of you who don't know, Chris Voss was a former hostage FBI negotiator.
FBI hostage negotiator.
Yeah, FBI hostage negotiator. And he talks about, he'd be in these situations where this bad guy has a hostage and they have these unreasonable demands and they're not willing to negotiate. I want $1 million in 24 hours. And he would disarm them and get them to negotiate by asking how. So he would ask them, well, all the banks are closed today. How are we going to get you $1 million in 24 hours? And then that gets them thinking, oh, well, yeah, this may not be reasonable, but they still feel in control, even though they're conceding here. And so it gets them to the solution with you. So not saying you should treat everybody at your organization as that extreme, but if you're getting that kind of resistance, it's a good tactic to use.
But also from that book, active listening, right, and empathy, two key of getting people to open up and understanding their perspective. So lots of good stuff in that book.
I love this idea about that you shared from the advantage that when there's high trust, conflict is pursuit of truth. And I think so oftentimes I simply don't have time to listen to somebody else's pursuit of truth. And so that idea of asking me questions that kind of probe into a space that I care about, involving me as part of the practical solution, you've got my attention. You're not just asking me to vote. You're asking me to get involved and take a position on it. And I think that's a really great call out, Sierra, linking those two together there. I hadn't thought about the split the truth piece linking up like that until you pointed it out. So that's great.
Should we turn to some questions from the audience? They've been very patient listening to us go on and on here. So once again, if you see a question in this list and you want to see it answered sooner rather than later, hit that thumbs up button. Let me do the refresh here. Okay. First question comes from Ross. Ross, thank you for your question. Thanks for joining us today. In a business that is mostly remote working with colleagues spread across the country, it's difficult not to have a disconnect between CS and product or dev teams. CS is also at capacity, incredibly busy supporting our customers. My questions are, what could we do better to remove that disconnect with remote working colleagues? And is there a process that we could put in place to better integrate product into CS interaction with customers? And by the way, our next CSM Mastermind is working effectively with product teams. So we're going to definitely get deeper into this next month. But it looks like, Ty, you want to jump in on this one first.
I have lots of feelings about this one.
Okay.
So I've been, I've been working remotely long before the pandemic. And I work mostly with international teams. So not just split up by country, but split up by time zones, borders, right? Um, I actually find that I find it easier to do it remotely than I do in an office. I think in the office, things happen haphazardly. You happen to be in the coffee room, the break room. And I think when you're doing it remotely, the only difference is it takes intention, right? And when we're doing it, it's not we're just bumping into each other. We have intentional meetings about exactly what we want to do and how we want to do it. It's really just about like setting up the time. I think sometimes when we do the remote thing, it's harder, and I just don't find that to be true. I just think it takes more planning and more intention.
And I think with planning and intention also, and I'm 100% with you, with planning and intention, you actually get, you have a higher degree of positive results
I
from
agree.
it rather than just kind of winging it,
Yeah.
doing the water cooler conversations, doing the hallway chat.
Yep. I agree.
Toby, Sierra, anything to add?
You know, if you don't mind, for those of that have been, interacted with me in the past, it's always been as return leverage. Magic Button Labs is a newer venture for me that my partner on the East Coast and I'm West Coast. We launched into this on the heels of COVID, not because it was easy or it was the smart thing to do, but we were both finding similar frustrations, and we said, "Gosh, we've seen this particular show play out. We're a partner in the Monday ecosystem. I'll leave it at that." But what we really noticed was that COVID allowed us to rethink what the right kind of team looked like. And it also meant that we had to change how we interacted. Ethan and I can't sit down over a beer and hash it out when we disagree. And so culturally, we spent a lot of time. And one of those recurring conversations that I hear a lot, and I really appreciate working with him, is that he says, I don't think that I'm saying it correctly yet. Or I don't think I'm understanding what you're asking yet. And so when we have all this time and distance, I'm waking up, you're going to bed, global teams, a lot of times we just have to realize that we're losing things in translation. Sometimes it's language. We have folks in the Philippines and in the Netherlands. And so there's always a little bit of the cultural, but then there's also all the body language that we miss out on. And so I think giving each other permission to continue to expand or take another run at trying to educate us and help us see what they're seeing, that's part of that active listening. But boy, when he kept saying, I don't think I'm explaining this right yet, I thought, God, what a gift to take ownership of it. Not that I'm not understanding it, because I wasn't, but he said, let me take another swing. Let me reframe it. And I find that to be so powerful as we continue to build our culture and try to build strong teams, when we're only getting together half a dozen times a year at best.
Yeah.
And once again, you can do that via Zoom. You can do that. I personally prefer it in some sort of video chat as opposed to a phone call.
Amen.
Yeah.
I'd love to know more too from Ross, like what the disconnect is. It kind of sounds like, based on the last sentence here, that he wants or they want more CS interaction from product, or interaction from product with customers, virtual too. So I would definitely look at, like, what are the high priority product improvements or new features that you think you really want to get customers in front of them. I'm sure they don't want to open up calendars to every customer can hop on, or they hop on every customer call, but are there some key, high priority initiatives for the quarter, the next 2 quarters, and you want to get some key customers in front of that can help improve your relationship, work with product and align on, like, hey, these are the criteria for which I would want you to join a customer call. They're very strategic and losing them would be critical, or, these are key features and I want to make sure we have these vocal customers, their input considered. Would be my advice.
I've also found that the hesitation from product getting involved in those kind of calls is also more about product feeling like they're on the hook to actually follow through on everything the customer asks. And what I found very effective was that, to kind of allay their fears and say, listen, I'm going to set the expectation of the customer that you're here to listen. There are no guarantees. just because you ask for this stuff. And it's important for customer success to set that expectation with the customer, but also sit down with product and say, listen, I am here to make sure that we're not signing you up for anything. We just want you to understand the business case. We want you to understand how the customer wants to use this functionality directly from them, because we feel that's going to be more impactful than you reading a Jira ticket.
Great call out. Yeah, I see that tension a lot where they're like, you told the customer we were going to deliver this, or they got the wrong impression because we joined this call. So help product by setting the right expectations with your customers.
Yes. And depending on the motivator from that product person, I also like to play the help me, I'm a dummy game, which is, hey, you understand this way better than I do. I'm trying to understand what they're asking for. Could you help guide me through this? I think you'll ask better questions than I am, if that's true or not.
Yeah.
But people like to be helpful in that regard, or show that they're smart. And I like to give them that opportunity.
But I think the key is getting product on the phone so they're not just hearing the ask, they're also hearing the emotion behind the ask. Because if it's something that's frustrating the customer, that's going to come across in the conversation. Whether they explicitly say this is frustrating, or they can see it in their body language or hear it in their voice. So much more powerful than just typing up a Jira ticket.
I love this motion that we see so often today, where all calls are being recorded, largely as a service, right? If you got to drop off, you can't attend, we can keep everybody together and on the same page. But for that very reason, we have these really powerful sound bites. And I love that idea about the emotional energy. It's one thing for me to retell, a story that I heard from Sierra or Andrew or Ty. It's different if I can play that sound bite and you just hear the frustration or the disappointment or the optimism. It can convey something very different. So love that.
And Ross, what you also, and I see your comment in the chat, what you also might want to do is record some of these sessions with your customers if they're on Zoom, or even if they're on a phone call, and pull out audio clips from that and send the audio clip. So once again, they're hearing the frustration, they're hearing the challenge, they're hearing the passion in the voice of the customer along with the ask. And maybe what that does is that gets them to the point where, okay, maybe I do need to sit down with this customer and understand it better.
Sorry to be the negative Nancy, but if that's a motivator for those people, I work with a lot of people that is just not going to be a motivator for them. They're way too clinical. And so I need to find something that motivates them. That's why sometimes I use the I'm a dummy, come help me. But there's other methodologies, but sometimes appeal to emotion does not work with people who are more,
Or maybe share that emotion with their leader and get their leader to talk about influence.
I'll try that second.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, carrot and stick isn't always flogging somebody or rewarding them. Sometimes it's just thinking about, given the situation, what's the best lead card? How do I engage? So,
but once again, also, you can, if you employ empathy, understand their perspective, understand what their desired outcomes are. You can also spin this as, hey, this is like a game changer, and I would love for you to be the one that brings this to product. Right? I'm here to help my customer, but I want to make you look like the smartest person on your team for bringing this up, which is the same thing, once again, that we're doing with our customers, right? When we're trying to get them to drive adoption, I want to make you look like the smartest person within these four walls for embracing what we've brought to you. So what can I do to help you look good? So once again, these are angles, these are strategies, these are skills that you should be practicing on your own customers. So none of this should be foreign to you. Let's see. Ross, thank you for the question. Ty, if you can hit done there. Let's see. Our next question comes from Alex. Can you share your experience on who are most demanding internal stakeholders when promoting a CSM as a new department of the company and how you managed it. Promoting, I'm assuming what you're asking, Alex, is who are the most demanding internal stakeholders when promoting customer success as a new department in a company and how you managed it. Sierra, you've been down this path before.
Yeah.
What have you got for Alex?
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I'll go in, I guess, the direction what I'm thinking.
Okay, let's start with that.
So, okay, so we're trying to promote a new CS as a new department in the company who's maybe back or is demanding on that. I think, you know, we constantly hear about like the fight for CS to not be seen as a cost center and, you know, more resources. And I think we often get compared to, you know, sales. Are we generating enough revenue? So I think there's questions from like the leadership level on how do we stake our influence? And I think we have to be prepared with numbers around the benefit of focusing on keeping our customers happy. And I think it's become a lot easier in recent years, right? We talked about this earlier, a couple of the panelists and I, around how before it was growth at all costs. And so there was a lot of focus on new business and sales, and they generate revenue and profit. But really the tables have turned and focus on profitability. And really the key to that is focusing on your customers and growing across your existing customer base. And there's just, I've seen all these different stats, but I think there's so much more potential at a lower cost to increase revenue across your existing customer base if you can keep them happy and help them achieve their goals, than try to pursue the cost of a new customer.
We talked about this in the prep call, but you also mentioned this earlier. Those three key data points: revenue, expense, risk. Right? We can increase our revenue. We can lower our expense for acquiring that revenue, and we mitigate our risk by investing in and supporting a customer success team.
Right. I think just believing in yourself and your abilities too. I think it's tough for a lot of customer success professionals today. You know, when a customer churns, you sometimes internalize that, but trust in your ability and your knowledge to diagnose issues, to solve issues within the organization, and to help your customer. You're the closest to the customer and responsible in many cases for most of the revenue at your organization.
Yeah, in a rapidly growing company, the sustaining revenue will outpace new revenue acquisition.
Absolutely.
So
that's why. Let me answer your question, Alex.
Yeah, that's why, Alex, right there.
I do think we often, following on that, this idea of net new revenue, I think traditionally executives have assumed an existing customer is ours forever, right? I don't know how they got there. Nothing else in my world works like that, where I put it in one place and it stays exactly there and operates as intended. So I really like that idea about recognizing that things are going to shift. And then we're talking a little bit about what's the value proposition. And so, I often think about the marketing teams, and they're often making their best guess, and they're looking at, statistically, what's the math of investment versus lead generation. But what they're not always having access to is the very data that CSs are gathering all day. Is it intuitive? What do customers like? Where does it fall short? What's the pain point that it's uniquely solving? I can't tell you how many times I've seen people repurpose a tool for something radically different. I'm sure you guys have seen these use cases, and you're like, God, that's not even our ICP. You're not supposed to use it like that. But I think when we start to hear that, all of a sudden we see new markets open. That's not just a marketing thing. Sales gets excited about that. And God knows that CFO is going to lose their mind if you tell them easy revenue. But the other element here is somebody has to manage that base. And so I have a product manager friend that was asked about tech debt service. We got to tune up some things. We're getting to these volumes. The question was, what new revenue does that bring in? And his response was It's not the new revenue, it's the hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue that we're going to bust. And so there's a couple of these pieces that kind of weave together as we talk about this CS value.
Awesome, Alex. Thanks for the question. Let's move on. Michael, good to see you. Michael's always here. He's a fixture in these. Michael asks, what do you all find easier to do, internal change versus customer experience change, and why? Customer experience change. Easier to do, internal change versus customer experience change. Man, they both have have challenges.
Yeah, it depends on who your customer is and what organization you're at. I don't know. They're both tough.
I think personally, I think it's easier for customer change, in that you've got a stakeholder that it's real easy to trace the money to the stakeholder and say, you've made this investment. And if I'm not getting your team to change quickly enough, effectively enough, in order for you to adopt what you've spent money on, that's going to look bad on you. So it's real easy to point to that person and say, hey, I'm just here trying to make you look like the smartest person here for bringing us in. A little different internally, right? You got all the politics. It's real easy, though, to link. You signed a contract for X amount of dollars, and you know what? Your peers, your individual, your direct reports, your boss, your board is not going to be happy with the fact that you did not get a return on the investment, and that's not on me. That I play a role in that, but you play a bigger role in that, in driving change. Right? We've talked about that, Toby, in the change management course, how, customer success managers aren't responsible for the change. They're responsible for enabling the change to happen. But the true people responsible for driving change have to be the leaders inside that company.
Yeah.
So my take is it's easier in a customer situation, because internally, politics and if I push too hard, am I going to piss somebody off? Am I going to not get that promotion? There's so many other variables.
Yeah, it feels like apples and oranges, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I don't know. It kind of depends, because you could be at a small organization working with large enterprise customers. Then I'd say it's probably harder for you to manage customer experience change because you've got a lot more stakeholders than you do at an organization. So it really just depends.
That's a valid perspective as well.
Yeah.
I would differentiate too, going back to your litmus test, Sierra. There is the temporal change. It's very tactical. And as small companies, we do that really well. But making a systemic change that outlives us is particularly difficult. And so, when I think about the work of a change agent, my goal is to give people both permission, but also the support and skills to be that effective change leader. My exercise room is nowhere near as attractive or clean as Sierra's. And it's not because I'm using it as actively, right? So I can cheer on and support and encourage others to eat clean and exercise regularly and sleep well. But to do it myself is always a task, right? And so I think when we build nice patterns to help clients adopt change and really start to see the common threads across our different client base, we do it once and it's repeatable. Whereas all of our changes that we ourselves have to go through are unique to us each and every time. That's the distinction for me.
That's a good point. Ty, you got anything to add?
That I like playing chess, so I really like the internal changes. But with a fun challenge.
So it's more of it's very, very much debate club for you. The first rule of debate club is there are no rules.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Michael. Hey, thanks for the question. Thanks for your continuous support of this series as well. Our next question comes from anonymous attendee. Anonymous attendee seems to show up a lot as well. Anonymous asks, so what do you feel is the best way to make sure cross-functional teams across a company are completely aware of what exactly customer success does? Also, what is the best way to get CS more involved with decision-making with sales, marketing, and product development? Yes, Ty.
Get sticky. So what do I mean by get sticky?
Get sticky.
Yeah.
Really?
we talk about getting our product sticky, but we need to talk about getting our CS org sticky within our own organizations, right?
I like that. Yeah.
What are you doing to connect with marketing on a monthly basis? How are you both feeding each other information, making your jobs easier? Are you doing that for the executive team, for the product team, right? Get really sticky. And then you have that platform to be able to tell them what you're doing because you're talking all the time. If
Mhm.
that is a super high barrier and you're not there yet, you have, monthly all hands calls. Get on those all hand calls, right? If you have executive meetings, get in those executive meetings. Have a good deck for them. But yeah, I would say step one is getting sticky. Make sure you work with all those orgs.
Yeah,
Get
we had
sticky.
this issue actually for a while, and we made sure that we had every department present. We had like what's the purpose of your organization? What are you trying to achieve? What's your main goal? Who are the members of your team with everybody's headshot? What are the key KPIs that your team tracks? And so I think just getting space in a group setting, if you have go-to-market meetings, if you have all hands, maybe open it up to everybody. I'm sure just as if they don't know what customer success does, there are probably others that your organization doesn't quite understand what dev does, what engineering or product or sales or marketing. And so use that as an opportunity to reset. We're coming up on a new year. Perfect time to do so.
Well, this is a team too that understands the importance of these quarterly check-ins. We do it with our clients. We do it externally facing. We prepare for these must-win conversations. We have objectives. We should be turning those very same skills internally. And I love that point that they often don't fully understand this. Not everybody grew up with CS as a function in the org. And so there's a lot of education that precedes, a lot of the valid points and data and insights that are being gathered.
I like so I love the get sticky, but I also like the quid pro quo, right? Which is something we talk about in some of the content. What can I do to endear myself to you? Hey, marketing, guess what? I've got this great use case from X customer. Hey, sales, I've got a CS qualified lead, or I've got a upsell opportunity. Right? What are you doing? Not just about getting sticky, but what are you doing to help them achieve what they're trying to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Once again, same mindset, same skill set that we're using with our customers. You're just applying it internally. All right. Let's see what else we got here. And we got a few more minutes, so we'll see how many more we can get through. So, Queen, I hope I pronounced that right, Queen. How would you respond to an internal organization that recognizes that considers the CS team a cost center? And I think we talked about this a little bit. I think it's all how you frame it, like you mentioned, Sierra, right?
Right. I think
Anything to add? Anybody?
You could stop being a cost center.
Yeah. Or you could talk about the cost of not.
Right.
I think it's important to frame what the cost is of going out and acquiring new customers versus getting business out of your existing customer base. There's a lot of statistics.
I'm a fan of monetization because I like owning my own budget. But if you're not in that position, yeah, you need to prove it out.
Yeah.
All the time.
And I also think part of this is a customer success needs to own a number.
Yes.
Period. Well, you're not along. Okay, Sierra, you and I are in agreement. What do you?
So think about this. So imagine you work in very large enterprise where every customer you have grows year after year. You're not doing anything. They're just going to grow year after year, and they're saturated across your entire product line. What are you holding exactly? What number are you holding?
You have
You're holding the sustaining revenue number.
Okay. That's not what people normally mean when they say CS is holding a number, right?
When I say owning a number, I'm talking about there is your existing book of business.
Sure.
Right. Plus, if there is an upsell, but that upsell is a small piece of that, right? It's all about maintaining what we have. I don't think there's anything wrong with customer success owning that book. That we're going to maintain whatever that number is. We're going to maintain 90% of our book of business from last year.
I guess what I'm saying is when growth happens organically and companies are saturated, it feels like a vanity number at times.
It's not a vanity number, though, because if you're doing your job and you're helping the customer achieve what they're trying to achieve and they're getting a
Sure.
return on their investment, it's more than a vanity number. It's a recurring revenue number.
Yeah. With or without us, though. Yeah. I'm just saying there's arguments to be made about large enterprises who have natural growth and are totally saturated. It's hard to have anything that really
We have
moves the
two
needle.
customers that have we've had this conversation with we have two customers that are huge software, huge SaaS companies that have sold into all the customers they can.
Mhm.
And they are 100% all in on customer success.
Yeah, I think
And
they
it's
should
all
be.
about and those customer success leaders own that number. Because it's all about trying to find new ways in which the customer can utilize their systems to get more value out of it,
Sure.
or at least maintain the status quo.
Yeah. There's other models, but yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you.
Okay.
I think one of the most expensive things I've seen, and I'm thinking about some of my past clients that are PE owned, and as they're aggregating and rolling up solutions, even sitting on the inside, you don't see how these things come together. And so I can't think of anything more costly than building a portfolio of offerings that don't make sense to your audience, right? Whether it's developing, builder versus buy, right? Same thing. And so the world, when I hear cost center, this is not the first function that I think about. But if it's a perception, then the question is, are you showing the value? And it may be asking, how do we show that value? Whether it's piloting new offerings or helping to position and identify early prospects to adopt these cross sells, those are invaluable. But if we don't call them out, people don't give us the credit.
Yeah, that's the key. You've got to call them out. I am responsible for X amount of revenue. I remember having a conversation with somebody over at Salesforce who told me that there was a point when they were there, and this a few years ago, where the CRO was given a $1 billion revenue number, and the head of customer success had a $2 billion revenue number.
Mm-hmm.
And she did not have a problem owning that revenue number because
And they're
she knew
cheaper
how
dollars to
important
get,
that revenue
right?
number was and how much you talk about influence. How much influence does she have with Benioff over the CRO
Love it.
when she's got double the revenue number that he does? And with that, we've come to the end of our time together today. So I wanted to say how awesome our conversation has been. But hey, it's not what I think. It's not what matter. What I think matters most. It's what all of you think. So I kindly ask you to share your valuable feedback on LinkedIn, tagging me, our guests, or Success Coaching. A big thank you to my amazing panelists for generously sharing their ideas, thoughts, insights, and best practices. Let me leave you with this thought. Exceptional customer success managers understand that they don't have all the answers, but they sure know where to find them. That's why we've created the CS Mastermind to tap into the collective knowledge and experience of our community to support everyone's growth. Remember to sign up and mark your calendars for our next event, our final event of the year, December 11th, when we'll talk about working effectively with product teams. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day. Have a great rest of your week and month. And for those of you that are celebrating Thanksgiving, have an awesome Thanksgiving holiday. See you all soon.